Okay, so having cleared up a little bit, I think it's time again for another test. With any of these models, I find that testing as you go along is usually a pretty good idea, and you tend to sort out your faults as you're going along without having to go back. Must admit, this is where it's really useful that we put the plug in here for the speed controller so that we can keep taking it on and off while we're building. That plug goes in, steering servo goes into channel 1, then the receiver. Pop those in there for now. Let's see. Well, I think that you would agree that that seems pretty good. One thing which I did notice when I was carefully checking out the original prototype, there's actually one more piece of plastic to remove on the body. I'm just drawing the line as to how it needs to be removed, and it's something like that. Coming down here, across there, and up the side. So unfortunately I will have to just chop that out. It's much easier at this stage than when there are wires in there. I'll just do that quickly and I'll be back. Okay, so I think that that's about it, and it will leave plenty of room for the servo arm that raises and lowers the telescopic arm. Just as well to do it now because it is much more difficult once you do have a bunch of wires in here. Okay, so it's time now to think about fitting the 20 kilogram servo. Don't forget that all of the parts I'm using are listed in the description, and the 3D printed parts which I designed on Tinkercad available at the Tinkercad link. When I get to the end of the series, I'm going to go back through the Thingiverse links and make sure that the very final version of each of the 3D printed parts is individually available on that site too. All of my 3D parts for this model are going to be available for free download, and they are going to remain free. So our aim here is to get the servo mounted inside there, sticking out of here. While I was planning the build videos, I thought that there might be one or two parts that I would make just in order to make the build process easier for people and to cut down on measuring and that sort of thing. So I made this little template here. This is actually printed in PLA because it isn't a part that I'm going to keep, and the MP Mini Delta is actually a much faster printer than the Prusa for me. This actually slides in like this. There's a little notch so that it will locate on the piece here, and at the bottom it just locates on the horizontal piece. That will basically put the servo exactly where you need it to be. If it's too high, it's going to foul with the telescopic arm, and if it's too low, it's going to bump into the steering arrangement. So that is about the right place. We're going to want 4 holes, and these are going to need to be 3mm. You could, I suppose, just hold the template there and draw straight through. I'm a little bit more cautious than that, so I'm just going to mark the centres. Like so. Plus you're going to need to make room for this round part of the servo to stick through, so just draw around the inside. Carefully lift it off and we can see exactly where we're going to be making our holes. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go through with my 1.5mm drill bit using the pin vise. Just check it quickly, and that looks okay. Then taking our 3mm drill bit, check again. And I think that that should be okay. Make a quick hole in the centre of there, just roughly the centre, doesn't really matter. And then I'm going to use the countersink in these two holes at the end here. And then the body reamer, try and get myself out to where I've marked the outside of this circle. Really, you want to keep going until you can't see any of the marking. Before going any further, I've actually found that this whole area here needs to be removed, and I'll just check on the camera to make sure that you can see what I'm talking about. Yep, so basically the yellow plastic that was covering over the black cab area needs to be completely removed here in order to get the servo in. The next thing that you're going to need are these two 3D printed parts. And you may notice that there's a little slot on each of them. In the original parts which I designed, it wasn't like this, and I actually trimmed the servo. For these, I've actually put those in, and it means that these blocks can only be mounted one way round on the servos. Having tested to make sure that your servo actually fits in there, and in particular, let's move this in, the round bit sits in the hole. The next thing you want to do is you want to take one of these blocks, noting where the slot is, and the slot has to be, if you're holding it this way around, facing down in towards the centre of the servo, and taking the two 20mm bolts, screw those in and keep going until they come out just the other side of the blocks. And then at the other end you do the same thing, again making sure of the orientation, otherwise your servo just will not go in, but this time using the countersunk screws. The reason why I'm using countersunk is because the servo arm would bash into normal bolts. Okay, so that's the 4 screws, and they're just protruding very slightly beyond the blocks. If you find that the blocks just will not sit straight, then maybe you need to go back and do a bit more filing, but providing you got the filing flat, these should be okay. Everything is pretty well millimetre fit, and I would very strongly recommend buying exactly this servo, because you know that it and its servo horn are going to go in here. I'm sure that other ones would, but I can only guarantee that this one is going to fit. So in order to get it in, you perhaps need to bend the plastic up a little bit there, slide it along, and it should just snugly fit. You might be able to see with the camera that the fit here is incredibly tight. When this is all bolted up, you've actually got less than a millimetre between the corner of the servo and the other side of the model, so it is all very, very precise. Next thing to do is to put nuts on the other side of these bolts and screw it all up. You could, I suppose, put washers in here. I don't think that I'm going to bother, but that would probably be better practice. So we've got the 4 M3 lock nuts, and that's what I'm going to put on the bag. Okay, so the telescopic arm servo is in place, and if I just put the servo arm on there for a moment and push it in, which would be about there, you can see how actually it's quite close to the body, but it doesn't touch it, so everything seems to be perfectly aligned. The wire for this, along with all of the rest of the wires, will actually find itself pushed through here. Although I don't think that I'm going to want the full length pulled out. I'm probably going to have to wrap some of it along the side or something, but we will come to that in due course. Okay, it's time now for some more soldering, and this is the bit where we put the second speed controller in. Now I think we're going to want to put the main transmission one on this side, because one will go here and one will go there. Let's just see where the wires end up, and using the hole that we made earlier, I should be able to post everything through, and it would seem that I can, apart from the switch. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to make a small slot in here so that I can get the wires in but they don't fall out. So if I chop there, that should enable me to pull the two halves apart but actually push them back together again afterwards. Taking these two wires here, so this one's the battery plug and this one is the switch, I can just ease the two halves of the hole apart and without pinching the wires get them in there, and then using the pliers put it back, and then I should be able to post the motor plug through as well. So that's all of those through. I was sort of hoping to get it this way around. Let's just see if I can. I think that that will be okay for the motor one. Plenty of length on the receiver lead, so I'll push that round here. I think these other wires are going to need to come straight across. I think that's fine also. Just turn it round once and that might push them underneath better. Push that one back. Just trying to get everything so that it's not going to mess with the steering plate. So that is where that is going to end up. And if I just take the other one to see where the space is, that's going to be able to sit just there. So I think that that's going to work out just fine. Take all of this out for a minute. Okay, so basically the first job that we're going to need to do is we're going to want to splice the two battery connector wires for the speed controllers so that they both get powered by the battery. Now these are going to end up next to each other quite close, and we really don't want excess wire in there, so it's going to go something like that. So making sure that it is the wire that connects to the battery, and you can tell which one that is because it's the one that the battery would plug into. We're going to chop that there, which is probably about 1.25 inches from the plug. Strip the wire. Looking to see where it's going to come. Probably again 1.25 inches or so from the speed controller itself. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to twist the two red wires together like so, and then tin them as a pair, getting plenty of solder on there. That's that. And then the two black ones, and then taking my power cord where we put the switch on it in one of the previous videos, I'm just going to strip that wire, tin them both, and then taking some slightly larger heat shrink than we've been using previously. I think we were using what would have been 2mm when it was pre-shrunk. This is probably more like 3. Chop a couple of those. If you've got it, it really doesn't do any harm to use the right colours. I am going to be putting a link in the description to a pack of heat shrink that you can get on Amazon. It's kind of worth having if you're doing plenty of soldering. Okay, put those on. Now hopefully the wires we soldered together in the first place won't come apart when we do this. There's one. Making sure we've got a good joint between all 3 wires. That's the other one. If you've got any sharp bits of solder sticking out, either go back to the soldering iron or just trim off with the side cutters. Get that properly over the joint, not too far. Just like with the first speed controller, we don't need this switch, it's just going to take up room we haven't got, so pop that off as close as we dare. That should put it in a permanent state of on, and then I'm going to cut the motor plug for the second speed controller pretty close to the end. We may have to extend this, I can't remember. Yep, I can tell we're definitely going to need more wire than that. I'm going to add about 4 or 5 inches of the silicone wire, which I think we used in the earlier video for the motor extension plug. It can be easily bought by the meter from component shop. There's a link to them in the description. I think we're okay with 2mm heat shrink. Okay, now for what I think is quite an interesting part. Start by cleaning this back surface here thoroughly with isopropyl alcohol, and particularly the backs of the ESCs, and having done so, make sure you don't touch them with your fingers again, because the grease absolutely will stop the double-sided tape from sticking effectively. Actually, just before we do this, there is one thing that I'll do in order that I don't forget, and that is when you've got 2 speed controllers on the go, you only ever have one of them having its red wire going to the receiver, and in actual fact it will still work if you take the black wire out from that as well and just have the signal wire, but generally I leave the black one in. Then taking one of my knives, you just flip up the little bit on the plug like that. If I can get underneath it, it actually lifts it up. That's it. That's up, and then you can just pull out the one that you're not using. Some people tape them up. What I tend to do is just get a bit of heat shrink, put it over like that. Shrink it on. That's certainly not going to do any harm now. Earlier I chopped this so that I can get wires through if I need to, and the only one which I know that won't post is this one here, the main power one, so I'll just slip that through. Being careful not to pinch the wires while I'm at it. The one for the motor and the telescopic arm is the one with these 2 stripped cables on it, and that's the one that's going to go on this side, and they're both going to go around that way. So what we're going to do is we're going to start by taking the speed controller for the main motors and just placing it roughly there, but the main thing is that I'm wanting its receiver wire to be coming round and underneath this tab and down the back of it. I'm going to take a piece of double-sided sticky tape and I'm going to cut a small length of it like so. Then I'm going to lay that across the bottom. There's probably too much here, I can trim it off afterwards, I'm not worried about that. And then I'm going to peel it back about that much. Take my speed controller for the telescopic arm. And stick that down. Okay, so we've got the receiver wire for the first speed controller. That can post through the hole, so that's one wire. The actual wires which are going to go to the telescopic arm, make sure that those are free and not wrapped around anything, and send those in the general direction of the telescopic arm. Then taking the receiver wire where we just removed the red cable, that can all post through. And again underneath the little tab, and then making sure that it's not tangled up with anything else. We've got the wire which plugs into the motor, i.e. that one. That needs to go through. I think that I'm actually going to pull the part apart there so I can just thread it through. And then all of the wires coming from here, I'm going to want them to come between the two speed controllers, like so, and everything should just tuck away. This wire here for the big servo, I forgot to do that one, so that needs to come through. Now that, if I let it come all the way through, is going to be much longer than all of the other wires, which I don't really want, so I think I'll pull that back a bit. Making it about that length will make it similar, and I'm just going to put all of the excess underneath that tab, like so, and I think that that will generally stay in place. Well, that looks as if everything is going to stay where it is and not fall down on top of the steering mechanism. Just spend a few moments sort of tucking things neatly, making sure the speed controllers are stuck down nicely, and I think that that should be okay. I just want to quickly check to make sure that the lights on both speed controllers come on when I plug in, so let's just check that very quickly. Yep, 2 lots of blinking lights. That has to be a good sign. I seem to have one speed controller up one way, one up the other. I don't think it really matters. I think I'm happy with all of that. I'm just trying to think if there's any more wires. Yes, there is one more wire. That is the servo extension lead used for the bucket servo, and this one here is one of these Y lead type affairs where you've got a male and female on one end and just a male on the other, so we don't need this one here. You could obviously buy a servo extension lead of the right length, which is I think about 40mm, but if like me you've got these lying around, it's sort of an easy way to do it. You aren't going to need this at all, although these are generally quite useful. So taking the one which is the same as the other end, just chop that. From the top, it sort of goes down behind here, and the end that you chopped is the one that comes out of the top, so the longer one is the one that goes down into the model. So if you just post that through, it's going to want to come to about roughly where that hole is. That's about where it needs to be. And then, just like all of the others, it will come round and post through the hole. I'm going to have to open it up again, like so. Close it up again, making sure that all of the wires are pushed well down. I don't think there's any harm in getting cable ties in there if you're having trouble getting them staying where they're meant to be. These seem to be alright. And what you're going to want is the wires being of a fairly similar length, because they're going to all need to go together to go into the receiver. I think that that's all of the wires underneath. I think we can put the chassis back on. Just do everything very slowly, making sure that there are no snagged wires or anything unhelpful like that. That's all clicked nicely, so that's quite a good sign. And then one we can remember, so channel 1 was the steering, channel 2 was the throttle, channel 3 is going to be the big servo, so that's that one. Channel 4 is going to be the one which is on this extension lead, which must mean that channel 5 is going to be the one that we use for making the telescopic arm go in and out. Well, we're almost at the end of this stage, just a couple more bits to go, but before I do all of that, I just want to make sure that it looks as if it might work. I've forgotten to plug in the motor. This is now a lot more fiddly than it has been previously because we've got a lot more wires in there. Well, to be quite honest, that plug has served most of its purpose apart from doing repairs now. Okay, so that's fine. Let's just test that.